This video is for young men who might be a bit discouraged or frustrated with how hard it is, how difficult it is to get an aesthetic physique, to get a physique that they like. Because it's very difficult, isn't it? You put in hard work, but sometimes you feel like you're not making any progress at all. Have you ever noticed, and you might start like nodding along as I tell you this, there are people in the gym that go consistently, at least 6 days a week, and they're doing kind of hard work. So they're, not just like on the treadmill, but their physiques never really change. They might get a bit stronger, but their physiques, their appearance, doesn't really change all that much. I recognize people in the gym today that I recognized 5 years ago when I first started that don't look all that different. It's been 5 years and their physiques have not changed all that much. Why is that? I want to tell you a bit of a story. When I first started, I was working out at home. So all the time I would just walk down into my basement in the evening. Oh, I had some equipment set up there and I would grab some dumbbells, go to the benches, and do some exercises. I was doing a push-pull leg routine, which is 6 days a week, right? So for example, on one of these nights, around 4 or 5 p.m., right? When I first started, it was like March, and it was still kind of like cold and got dark early where I live. So it's kind of dark outside, it's cold, and I walk down into the cool basement, and there's the equipment set up there, right? I put in my earbuds and I start playing the music that I like. I sort of take my pre-workout. I forget what pre-workout I was taking. If I was taking pre-workout, maybe I was taking BCAAs instead, but I was taking something before every single workout, right? I would walk over to the equipment and then I would do exercises for whatever day it was. And the entire time, my brain absolutely hated it. So, for example, I would hear a podcaster recommend that I only needed to do 3 days per week at the start to begin building muscle mass, right? And so my brain would say, well, why don't we just do 3 days a week of resistance training instead of 6 days a week, right? If 3 days a week gets us there, why don't we just start with that? We don't have to do all this like 6 day a week bullshit. But a little voice in my head would always tell me, no, 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 we need to do more. We need to work out more than that. We need to work out at least 6 days a week. Anytime I would try and progressive overload, I would grab 25 pounds for an exercise that I could previously only do with 15 pounds, for example. My brain would be like, oh man, this sucks. Like, why do we have to progressive overload so soon? Why can't we just stick with the 15 pounds more, right? Like, this is going to be so uncomfortable. You're not even sure if you're doing it correctly. The form's going to suffer because you picked up weight. Maybe this is like too soon. Maybe we're progressive overloading too soon. I mean, you were just at 10 pounds the other week. Why are you grabbing 25s now? But a little voice in my head would always tell me, no, 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 no. We need to do more. We're not doing enough. We need to grab heavier weights. I'm not exactly sure where this voice came from, but every time there was something that my brain would try and rationalize doing easier, right? Kind of like going like the traditional route, which was just gradually, get a little bit better, but kind of stay within the comfortable zone. Don't push yourself too hard, but gradually improve, right? That's like the hard work, like standard hard work. Let's work out some amount of days a week, and then eventually we'll, keep working towards some result. That's the 3 day a week kind of thing, right? But a little voice in my head would always tell me, no, 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 3 days a week is not going to work for us. 3 days a week is not good enough for us. Just sticking with the 15 pounds isn't good enough. You aren't good enough. Do more work. I think it was because I went in with the realization that I was very, very small and I needed every advantage that I could get. And I was also kind of angry with myself for being so skinny. And so I knew I had to put in more work than I thought was reasonable. And so whenever my brain would come up with rationalizations and excuses, I would always shut it down immediately. And that voice in my head would always tell me, no, no, you need to do more. Maybe it's not reasonable for you to do more than 3 days per week when you're first starting out, but you need to do more because you are a special case. You have to put in more work than everyone else. And I just kind of accepted that because I was so sick and tired of being 135 pounds with no muscle mass. And so essentially, I was just like, okay, I need to put in more work than necessary. I had absolutely no idea that I was onto something way bigger by putting in more work than I thought necessary. I thought it was unique to me. But I found out, I'm gonna try and draw you something here to illustrate that it was not unique to me, right? So this is the range that I think normal people in the gym kind of experienced, right? So it's that sort of range, right? So they were here, they got to here, and they made pretty good improvements, but that was like the standard of like basic hard work. That's the 3 day a week, like, okay, the kind of the basic advice without doing work more than necessary. I started here. So I started behind everyone else because I was so skinny and I'll put pictures up on screen, but yeah, so I started behind everyone else. I assumed I needed to work harder than everyone else to get to here, where everyone else was. Instead, what I found was I ended up making better results than most other people that put in the standard hard work, like just the work that they had to. When I realized that, I started to suspect that the kind of mental model that I had made for myself, which was do more work than you think is necessary, wasn't just specific to me. I started to suspect that it was maybe universal, right? And so when you ask the question, why is it so difficult to get an aesthetic physique? And the answer is because there's a rule that says you need to put in more work than necessary. I haven't even achieved the ideal physique that I want to yet, but I'm on the right track because I'm putting in more work than I think is necessary, right? That specific rule is this. I'm going to write it out for you. You need to put in 2 times the amount of work, but will receive 20 times the result. You should expect to put in more work than you think is necessary. You remember at the beginning of the video, the example I gave of the guy who's been in the gym for years and he's not wasting time, like he's, not just on the cardio machines wasting time, and he's going 6 days per week, but his physique doesn't really improve. He makes a few strength gains, but his physique doesn't really change and improve. The reason is because he's putting in the perceived work required to get the result, but not anymore. When you kind of go this traditional route that most people go when they're like, all right, I need to start weightlifting, so I'm going to begin going 3 days per week, and I'm going to do 30-minute sessions each day, resistance training, and then I'm going to start working towards my, dream physique. That's all good, or even 6 days a week, right? That's good. But it's not any more than is standard required of you. That's like the traditional, okay, just start here and then you'll get a good physique, right? You're not putting in extra work when you do that. And what you'll notice is the people that do that, that begin okay, I've got a 3 day a week plan to begin working out, starting with 40-minute sessions a day, and then I'm going to slowly progressive overload, start with light weights, and then I'm going to slowly progressive overload. What you'll notice is they don't actually get any fucking results. In fact, they don't get any results for a long time, and then they actually fall off because they don't see any results and they get discouraged, right? And they wonder why. And the reason is because they're not doing the work. Now they're doing the work, they're doing the hard work required, which is they're going to the gym 6 days a week, 3 to 6 days a week, and they're resistance training, and they're focusing on compound lifts. They're doing all the standard stuff that everyone tells them is really good, except for doing more work than what is required. Because they think they know how it works, they put in the required work, but they don't overwork. They don't put in extra. By the way, it's not a bad thing at all if you're doing that, right? It's good that you're in the gym, but if you do that, you're not going to get the results that you want. And I want you to get really good results, right? So I need to teach you this law, which is put in twice the work and then you'll get 20 times the result. But if you put in 1 times the amount of work, the standard work required, you're not going to get any result. If you don't believe me, here's an example from nature, okay? This is how Mother Nature rewards the farmer. When a farmer wants to grow crops, he has to go out into the fields, till the fields, he has to plant the seeds, then he has to water the seeds and make sure the seeds are watered for a long period of time as the crops grow. He has to make sure disasters, like crows and birds and stuff, don't pick away the crops and like eat all of the food and ruin the crops. And then, only then, once it's ripe, then he can come out there and he can harvest the crop. But he receives like more than even 20 times the reward. He receives 100, 1,000 times the reward of the work that he put in. When you say, I'm going to do just the work required to get a good physique, you are like the farmer who walks out into a field with his like scythe or whatever, whatever they do like harvesting with. I'm not a farmer. And just expects there to be like corn there. He just expects there to be like plants there for him to harvest. Because following that logic, all he has to do is just swing the scythe, and that he has to do the work of the harvest, which is the work required to get the crop. And so you expect there to just be like all of this stuff already waiting for you, and then as you perform 1 unit of work, you receive 1 unit of result. That's not how it works. You need to put in upfront work if you want to receive the reward. And the reward is better than you can possibly imagine. We should all imagine ourselves how I imagined myself when I was 17. I imagined that I was special. I was a special case. I couldn't do just the work that other people had to. I had to assume that I was this magical special snowflake that just had to put in more work than anyone else to get the result that everyone else got. And what surprised me, and what will surprise you, is that instead of getting just the result everyone else got, I got way more than what everyone else got because I put in more work. If you think about yourself this way, and you're just like, okay, for other people, maybe they can just do this much. For me, I have to always go until failure on every exercise. I have to always try and pick up heavier weights, even when I don't want to. I have to go on days I don't want to because I can't afford to. I'm just not like that. I'm not built like that. I can't do just bare minimum work. I don't have good genetics for this, whatever. I have to put in more work than what's required. If you think about yourself like that consistently, you will make so much more progress than everyone else who's putting in hard work, but just the work they feel is just enough to receive the result that they want. They won't ever actually receive the result that they want. Maybe like after a long, long period of time, they'll get pretty close. You will receive 20 times the result that you want. Why do you think having an aesthetic physique is so uncommon, even among people that are in the gym, right? There's a lot of people in the gym. Not all of them have good physiques. It's because everyone else is just doing the amount of work they think is required, but it's only 50% of the work that they need to be doing to receive the aesthetic physique. As an actionable step for this video, here's what you need to do if you want to actually get an aesthetic physique, not be like the guy that's in the gym for years, wastes all that time, but his physique doesn't really change. That is this. Every single time your brain tells you to stay within that comfortable range where you're like, okay, I'm working hard, but I'm not outside of my comfort zone. You need to remind yourself that you need to put in more work than is necessary. If your brain complains, remind yourself, no, I need to put in twice as much work as I expect to. Go until failure when you don't want to. Pick up heavier weights, progressive overload when you don't want to. Go to the gym on days that you don't want to. Just expect that you will have to put in more work than everyone else, and you will receive a reward that is bigger than anyone else's. If you got any value from this video, there's something that you can do which is a win-win for both of us, which is to scroll down and click the subscribe button. I win because I get a new subscriber. You win because anytime I have a new insight, learn something new, or try something new, I can make a video and directly give you value. If you are more interested in getting an aesthetic physique and willing to invest in yourself, if you're like serious about it, the top link in the description is my full program. That is all 5 years of my lifter knowledge put into like a single course. It's very heavy, it's very dense, very value packed. So that's not as digestible as these videos, but it's like way more valuable. It's like more than I could possibly put into like a single video. It's like I sat down for days to record it, and then I edited it down to like several hours of me just walking through like personalized lessons and advice. So if you resonated with this video, you'll actually resonate a ton with that course. And regardless, like subscribing is free, so go do that. Bye.